call to order Silicon Valley Clean Energy Executive Committee meeting of April 26, 2024 at 10:07 a.m. Can we please have the roll call?
Chair Klein.
Present.
Director Walia. Here. Director Tyson.
Here.
Thank you. That is all we currently have present. Vice Chair Makachuk is on his way and should be here shortly.
Very much. First up on our, first up is public comment. We'll skip consent. Public comment. This is a chance for the public to take comment on items not on our agenda this morning. No speakers in the room. Is there anyone remote wishing to speak?
No hands raised, Chair.
Thank you very much. We'll skip our consent calendar until we have quorum and move on to our regular calendar. First up is our CEO report. Monica.
Okay, well, we have a couple of quick presentations or just verbal updates from staff, but I just wanted to touch on a couple of things. First of all, thank you all for attending the CalCCA annual conference last week. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. And it was really great to sit with you and to hear what you guys were hearing and kind of figure out what we could do as staff going forward to help you, take action on some of the things that we learned. And so we've got some sessions or educational information items coming to the executive committee and the board in the coming months. And I think one of them that is going to be really important for us to really understand, and we're going to start from a very kind of foundational level, is this whole concept of regionalization. For those of you who were at the end of the conference, that was a big presentation at the very end. I think it left a lot of people with a lot of questions, including a call for help in terms of when this becomes a legislative issue. And so we're going to start, Chris and Bennett are going to start kind of introducing the concept of regionalization and what that means and how it can be beneficial for SVCE for California. So we'll do that. Also wanted to announce that our Go Electric Advisor is now live. This is a concierge service that we provide via our website. And so you all should have gotten some announcements via email from staff that that's live. Please promote that as much as you possibly can. It's a great service. And with that, I am going to hand it over to Ben, who's going to provide an update on the income graduated fixed charge.
Great, thank you. And I'm also here with my colleague Lolly and help answer any questions, but I'll get things started. So wanted to give you an update on the income graduated fixed charge. As you might remember, this was something that the governor signed through a budget trailer bill about 2 years ago that would require the CPUC to allow the IOUs to charge an income graduated fixed charge. And this is a policy idea that really has two parts to it. First, it would remove some charges from being usage-based to a fixed charge. And then secondly, the fixed charge would be based on your income level. Next slide, please, Andrea. So the update here is recently the CPUC issued a proposed decision on how they will implement the income graduated fixed charge, the first phase of it. During the CPUC process, you might remember that a lot of different stakeholders engaged and submitted proposals with a wide variety of different costs and income tiers. As an example, one of PG&E's proposals included a fixed charge of $92 for the highest income customers. So you'll see here in this chart that the proposed decision actually significantly scales down the amount of the fixed charge. The fixed charge for the highest income tier would be $24.15, and that is a cap, so that was the most amount that could be charged. And then you'll see that CARE, FARA, and also certain residents of affordable housing developments would pay a lower fixed charge. We're expecting the CPUC to vote on this as early as May 9th. Next slide, Anita. At the same time, you might have heard that there have been a lot of legislative proposals around the fixed charge, and most of them have centered around repealing the fixed charge. The most prominent of these bills was AB 1999 by Assemblymember. We heard this week that that bill is not going to move forward, and we don't expect the other straight repeal bills to move forward either. The one bill on here, SB 1292 by Bradford, is moving forward. That's really a reporting bill, which says the CPUC, after you implement income graduated fixed charge, come back to the legislature and tell them how it's performed. So we have been working with CalCCA both on the legislative and regulatory fronts on advocacy around this. So you might remember on the regulatory front, CCA has been advocating for all of the generation costs to not be included in income graduate fixed charge. Happy to report that this was a major win. The proposed decision does not include any of those charges. And then on the legislative side, it's unclear whether or not there'll be additional legislative effort to work on this year. But we're definitely working very closely through CCA monitoring. Be happy to report back out to the executive committee and board if there's any changes. I'm happy to answer any questions.
It seems doable.
Yeah.
That was my, that's the question. What is?
Does it seem doable?
Yeah.
Thank you, Ben.
So what can we take back to our residents who have been very worried for the last 2 years?
Yes, so maybe this is something we can follow up with the board in writing afterwards, with just some talking points about what we just explained. Here are the different. Yeah, we can take that as action item.
I think we're working on just a 1 or 2 page document all about affordability in itself, and this will be part of it as well. So Pam is taking the lead on that with Ben, and we'll get something out by the end of month, maybe early next month.
That would be good.
It's a complicated topic.
No, exactly,
Yeah.
with what's been approved, what's pending to be approved, right, beyond the fixed rate. So I think all of our residents are worried, and you see it,
Yeah.
you know.
But this is very
across the
much a
state.
compromise, I think, between
Yes.
the state and.
Is it comment time or are we asking questions?
We can either,
It's the CEO report.
it's a CEO report,
Oh, okay.
so we can ask questions specifically about.
Okay,
the CEO
so
report.
I'm not sure what our position is going to be. But when I was at the CCA conference, when they did that lightning round, and they said, what is, if Governor Newsom could do one thing, what should he do? And I believe it was Mike Wara from the Door School of Sustainability at Stanford. He said, if there's one thing the governor could do to lower rates is to have more battery storage behind the meter and in front of the meter so that the peaking gets reduced. And I think we with all the CCA members should advocate for that. So I wanted to, and I will say that I am hearing from my local constituents, not from my SVCE constituents, but is that rates are, PG&E power rates are top of mind for them. And they are seeing no end of the increase in power rates. And, okay.
And, yeah, continue.
So I just want to make sure that we're on time here because we're losing the quorum very soon.
Monica, just one
Around
quick,
11:30, I could have to go.
just one quick comment to slide in to follow up what Brian said. I've brought this up in the past as well. Cooper Garrett in Saratoga, big winery, 100+ year old family living there. They do a lot. And I met them even 2 days ago, Arbor Day, Doris.
Oh, Doris, okay.
And they have won a sustainability award recently. And this is the person I have been quoting the last so many months, that there is a good problem with the power supply, both affordability. I just want to document that when people who are getting sustainability awards, they can't afford this, they have a problem with reliability, and therefore they do not like the idea of moving toward electric. Just those two.
Okay.
Nothing new, that's it, thanks.
Thank you, Monica.
Yeah, so I made a mistake earlier and I said that Hannah was going to be presenting during this year. It's actually Zoe, because we've been providing the update on the REACH codes and some of the actions that some of our cities have been taking in response to the Berkeley ban and that lawsuit. So Zoe?
Great. Good morning. So this is a bit of a more kind of detailed follow-up to the board report that, or not detailed, focused follow-up to the board report that we did earlier this month around the REACH codes and electrification policies. So as folks, we're seeing kind of more in response to the Berkeley decision, getting lots more questions from a lot of staff. So just kind of wanted to update everybody. As everyone knows from the last board meeting, Mountain View did suspend their code and are actively looking for an alternative. Our understanding is that's a process that will happen through the summer. We have at least 2 other cities that are in a similar process of considering suspension and then looking for a different pathway. And then as well, just a refresher that Milpitas and Los Altos suspended many months ago. So that's kind of a total of 5 cities who are either suspended or considering suspension. And then again, almost unanimously, the cities who have suspended or considering suspending also are following up to identify kind of an alternative pathway to continue momentum on pollution-free buildings. And so a reminder, we've got these 2 model codes that are kind of ready to go and ready to be adapted for each city. Tony and I are on call to provide all the kind of support that folks need, and a refresher on those 2 alternative codes. One was kind of designed in reaction to the Ninth Circuit's decision. It's called the Energy Performance Pathway. It's kind of designed to be compliant with that 7-point test that they lay out in the decision. The other is an air quality approach, which the city of Los Altos Hills has adopted and other cities are considering, which is designed totally different air quality pathway, uses that authority, is designed to be much simpler to implement than the Energy Performance Code. So we're just, that's kind of the high level. We're simultaneously kind of also moving forward on existing buildings piece, but also want to be transparent that for some cities, this is taking priority and taking some staff time. So some of those activities are getting kind of shuffled around and reordered. That's my update. If there's clarifying questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you. Any questions, Joe?
Thanks. Just a request, if in my city you need help, things are going slower because of other priorities from staff. Let me know.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you, Zoe.
Thanks, everyone.
Anything else?
Nothing else from the CEO report.
Okay. Any public comment remote? Okay. Good. We'll move on to item number 2, recommend the SVCE Board of Directors authorize Chief Executive Officer to execute necessary agreements for the resource adequacy capacity for the High Desert Power Project. Report. And it looks like, oh yes, Chris will be doing this report.
Yeah, hello everyone. Good morning. Hopefully you can hear me. Andrea, next slide, please. So the request of the executive committee is to authorize the Board of Governors to authorize the Chief Executive Officer to execute a long-form RA agreement with High Desert Power Projects. It's a 6-year RA agreement. It's from January 1, 2027 to December 31st, 2032. It's 50 megawatts. It's got RA attributes, system and flex. It's a 6-year agreement, and I think it's important for everyone here to understand we do these agreements all the time. We do them on a much smaller scale, 1 month, 1 year, 3 years. This is just more than the CEO's authority to execute, which is why we're here today. Next slide, please. So just a little background. So California has an RA framework, and what that does is it ensures that every LSE, load serving entity, has enough capacity to meet grid reliability conditions. So currently, California must ensure there's a sufficient capacity to meet the monthly peak demand, but this is changing. And so we're moving away from a single monthly peak number to 24 different numbers, and this is known as slice of day. And so we will have requirements that we'll need to meet on a 12 by 24 basis. It's 12 months, 24 hours per month. And those requirements are based on the highest load years or worst day of each month. Next slide. So just kind of review what an RA contract is. It's the rights to the capacity of a contract, right? There's no energy associated with it. These contracts are designed to meet the RA program. The RA only contracts are mostly natural gas, right? It's the natural gas fleet that kind of fuels that over-the-counter market. And again, just to reiterate, this board has delegated the authority to the CEO to transact these types of contracts with a term of less than 5 years. Next slide. So in March, we went out and we solicited for what we call baseload RA. And so baseload RA is really an RA type that has the same capacity for each hour. So if you think about the change in the RA framework, right, going from one monthly number to 24, a natural gas unit can provide 24 hours at the same price. Other resource types, solar, wind, they can't do that. They have a profile. And so we were looking for baseload RA for the years 27 to 31. We got 3 offers. Middle River Power's High Desert project was the most competitive. And so we started discussions with them. Next slide, please. So just a little bit about High Desert. High Desert Power is a CCGT in San Bernardino County. It's 830 megawatts. We are
Just quickly,
Going out to 50
CCGT is a combined cycle gas turbine.
yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
It's a gas plant.
So yeah, it's a very large gas plant. We're going after 50 megawatts of flex and system. The delivery term for this project is from January 1st, 2027 through December 31st of 2032, 6 years. We're only getting RA and there's no energy or emissions attributed to SVCE. Next slide. So this is why we're here, right? So the SVCE is seeking the Executive Committee recommend that the Board of Directors authorize the CEO to execute the transaction. This is planned for the May 2024 Board of Directors consent calendar. Just some more points. RA is changing from a single peak number to the slice of day framework. These types of resources, natural gas resources, provide a baseload RA 24 hours of RA capacity. The High Desert contract will help with our portfolio and managing our RA obligations. And this is just part of our ongoing procurement strategy to ladder in these transactions over time. And then this contract will align with SVCE strategic plan. Are there any questions?
Any questions first?
Quick question, Chris. Thank you so much for the presentation. And to keep things in perspective, where is our usage of natural gas only for RA purposes today? Because I noticed in the staff report, it's 35% in 2027. So are we going up from today or are we going down?
That is a good question. I think someone's going to respond. Monica, did you want to?
When we went to the board last year with the Middle River Power Hanford peaker plant, we had a big discussion, multiple months discussions about the difference between capacity, clean capacity, and clean energy. And we are a clean energy CCA. Capacity, we have to rely on natural gas. When we first formed, it's probably safe to say that 100% of our RA was being met through natural gas resources. We're currently somewhere closer to 75%. But as our PPAs come online, and we have to build a lot of solar and a lot of wind in order to get where we need to get. But as all of them come online by 2027, we'll be at about 35% from natural gas. So we'll never go down to zero, not even the state, right? We have to keep some natural gas capacity online, even when we get to 100% carbon free in 2045, because we need natural gas for reliability purposes. So we have made significant progress. But we have to buy a lot more capacity to get to where we need to get to in order to just meet our compliance requirements. So, so does that answer your question, Tina?
It definitely does, Monica. Thank you so much, because it's telling us we are really going down and dramatically.
Yeah, but we'll never get to zero, just to be clear, on capacity.
Reliability is required.
So,
Yeah.
if possible, my suggestion would be forward with this, that when it comes to the board, make that, because in my mind, when I read the staff report, and we had this conversation earlier.
Certainly, that would be a question for the executive committee on whether we can take it on consent or whether we should take it as a regular agenda item.
I think it's fine for, in my opinion, it's fine for consent. It's just, I do think that part of the minutes from here just can.
Yeah, and
capture
we'll
what you
reflect
said.
that in the staff report on Ray.
Yeah, Vice Chair.
So I've got a number of questions. And it is, the reason why this is coming in front of us, Chris, is because it's for 5 years, or 6 years, not 5 years. Okay.
That's right.
How many more 6-year sort of agreements will be coming up in front of us or in front of the CEO? I know it's hard to predict the future, but is this a one-time event or is it going to be multiple? Where I'm going is I'm wondering if we need to change our policy or if we're okay on that.
That's a good question. I don't, it's hard to predict the future, like you said, but I think we wanted 5 years and they tacked on a year and it was a nice price, right? And so at that point, you're starting to do the math and like, okay, well, we'll take it to the board, right?
Okay, so I think that's an important point as well, that this isn't going to be coming up time after time. It's just, it was opportunistic going for 6 years. And then you mentioned there were 3 bids. And just to clarify, they're obviously all natural gas. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So now I'll make a comment. I'm okay with having this on consent, having had this discussion. But as was said, I think we just need to have it in the minutes or in the staff report. And it's, all those questions were answered, and that's why the executive committee is comfortable with it and recommending it for approval to the board.
One question, Chris, so you talked about slice of day and how that's kind of affecting us. How is that affecting our existing contracts, or does it? Is it only for, it's the framework's changing, but is that a state changing requirement that now changes our existing contracts and we don't see it because Monica has that ability to re-sign the existing contracts, or how does that work?
I'll let
So,
Chris.
yeah, I think this is just part of signing contracts, right? There's regulatory risk. And so the framework changes, we fit our contracts into this and we pivot, we figure out how to make it work, right? And that's just part of the discussion with the PUC and how these markets get structured, right? And so the whole, the PUC process is very much a report where other market participants participate, right? And so everyone knows this is happening. It's not like it's a huge surprise. We have a pretty good understanding of how it will impact us. It's a very complicated topic, and I'm happy to explain as much as I can about it, but I think it would take us a very long time.
Yeah, just at a high level. So when we sign a power purchase agreement, say for solar gets RA counting that's outside of the contract. So we'll sign 100 megawatts of solar, for example. Outside of the contract for RA purposes, the decision on how much of that capacity we can count is made. So the CPUC, the California Public Utility Commission, is the one that determines how much of that solar we can count towards RA. So in the past, if we had 100 megawatts, they say, oh, you can count 17 megawatts in this month, 20 in this month, 13 in this month, 0 in this month. And so we would take that net qualifying capacity number and we include it in our filings for resource adequacy. Under slice of day, that's not going to change. But now the CPUC will tell us for every hour how much we can count of solar. And so we take that into our models, we add up all our PPAs, and that tells us, so the PPAs don't change. Right? It's how much we can count that changes. So, and And we can't go back to our developers and say, hey, you need to give us more in every hour, because that's not how these work.
Understood. But I'm just wondering, is that something,
It's
so.
very complicated.
Okay, I appreciate it.
Yeah. And we are, for the most part, we're doing relatively well with our portfolio because we've layered in natural gas and geothermal resources. We do have some procurement that we still have to do, but relatively small compared to our whole obligation.
Thanks, very quick follow-up on that. So are you expecting the way we have to now account for every hour, going back to the PPA, solar PPA example? Do we know whether that's going to be a big problem for RA, the new way of doing this?
Well, I'll let Chris follow up on that.
I mean, I think, I would say it's not a huge problem. I think it's a shift in priorities is how I would put it. You know, when you have shapes, right, you're trying to puzzle in these different shapes to fit your load obligations, and it's just this isn't a great answer, but it's just a more complicated problem, right? And so I don't anticipate it to be a huge issue, but it's a change. And I do think I've said this in the past, I think it's going to be more expensive for younger LSEs because LSEs that have been around for a while have a more mature portfolio, they have more diversity, and they can rely on that. We came into procurement at a very specific point in time, and so our portfolio reflects that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so we're positioned well. Like I said, we're positioned very well. And we've devoted resources just to work on resource adequacy and slice of day and understanding how to model it and identify our needs and our certainty around our needs. So we're in a good place.
Thank you. That's
Yeah.
good to hear. A lot of complexity, a lot of moving pieces, constantly moving pieces because of the regulatory
Yeah.
environment.
Yeah, so 2024, the current year that we're in, was a test year. So we had to submit our reports to the CPUC as though we had to meet the obligation, and we did really well. And 2025 is the go live year for slice of day. And so that's what we're really kind of focusing on now is 2025 and beyond. We're in a good position for 2025.
That's wonderful. Wonderful to hear. Thanks.
Things happen though. Projects get
Yeah.
delayed.
Yeah.
Projects get canceled sometimes. So things can always happen.
Thanks. One other quick comment based on what Brian was saying earlier, the meeting minutes from this meeting. This item, if we all agree to put this on consent, and I support that, the information will show up in two places. Staff report for that item in consent, as well as the minutes of this committee meeting. So I think it can be captured in two ways, which should reassure most board members. My take.
I agree, and I would prioritize the staff report, just knowing how people are with minutes.
Yeah.
But I'm in agreement with these other, and when you're ready for a motion, I'm ready to give.
Okay.
I move that we
Mike,
yes,
is there any public
Oh.
comment? No one remote? Go ahead with the motion.
I move that we proceed with recommending the authorize the CEO to execute the agreements as noted in item.
I second that.
We have a roll call vote.
Yes, we don't want to do a roll call. We don't have to.
Oh,
since
that's right.
everyone's-
Everyone's in the room. Everyone in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None? Any abstentions? None? Passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Next up, we'll move to item 3, proposal for Hanford,
It's item 4.
or item 4, sorry.
Well, you want to go back to the consent
Oh,
item before
Actually,
we.
thank you. That was my fault. Let us go back to our consent calendar item now that we have quorum. We have one consent calendar. Are there any questions on consent? Or anything that needs to be pulled? Basically, the approval of minutes. Any public comment remote? No one in the room? Is there a motion for a consent?
So moved.
Second by the vice chair. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None? Any abstentions? None? Passes unanimously. Thank you. And we'll move on to our next item. I got my item. Item 4, proposal for the Hanford Hybrid Plant Emissions Migration Guideline.
Can I do a little bit of introduction before Lolly starts her presentation? And so if you all recall, the Hanford contract, which was a natural gas peaker along with a clean battery associated with it, was brought to the board. And when we brought it to the board also directed us to come back and develop a set of guidelines on how we might create a fund that would be for the benefit of those people who live in the community where Hanford's at. And so staff has really spent a lot of time on this and worked across the whole organization to get input from everyone on how we could best do this to kind of align with our mission and what we think would be good for that community. But these are only a set of guidelines and it's only in proposal form. And so we want really your feedback on whether we're anywhere near what the board would consider to be a good proposal or a good set of guidelines or a good fund. We're more than welcome to take all criticism and feedback and come back to you if we've missed the mark. And so but we had to put something out there. This, I think, is a really good proposal. We're really looking for your feedback.
I'll just make a comment before you get started. When I was at the Cal CCA conference and the chair of the California Energy Commission did his presentation, he had one picture of some power plants and with residents in the area. I can't remember I don't know if you remember that photo or not, but that was pretty striking me. And so I'm looking forward to what you're going to present.
But it's going to be some lolly though.
Oh, sorry.
Never thought, oh no. Thank you.
Lolly, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Monica, for that introduction. All right, so I will be, as Monica said, presenting on our proposal for the Hanford Hybrid Plant Emissions Mitigation Guidelines. Next slide, please. And so the purpose of today's discussion is to present our proposal to you and to get your input on the draft guidelines. And before I get into that, I kind of want to remind everyone why we've developed these guidelines in the first place. And so last spring, in April of 2023, the board adopted a resolution, as Monica was saying, that approved a 12-year PPA for a hybrid natural gas power plant and battery energy storage system. And in that resolution, the resolution required staff to develop a policy or guidelines to set aside funds that would be used for programs or projects to help mitigate the emissions associated with the energy produced by the Hanford hybrid plant. And so all of this activity is really a result of SVCE being proactive about ensuring that its portfolio management activities leave a net positive impact on communities, which I think is something that we should be really proud of. So next slide, please. In terms of where the plant is located, I just want to provide kind of a picture of the community. So Hanford is located in Kings County, which is in the San Joaquin Valley. The population in 2021 was almost 60,000, and the median household income for a family of four is around $43,000. And I think the most important thing to highlight here is that Hanford has been designated a disadvantaged community by Cal EPA's Cal EnviroScreen. And so Cal EnviroScreen looks at a whole host of indicators, specifically pollution exposure related and socioeconomic. So Hanford ranked in the top 25% based on those pollution and socioeconomic factors and has been designated a DAC. Next slide, please. All right, so in terms of the actual plant itself, the Hanford hybrid plant is a hybrid natural gas peaker power plant and battery energy storage system that we contracted with for 12 years, and this was to ensure that SVCE could meet its resource adequacy program obligations. So I'm sure you're all aware the RA market in California is extremely tight, and we thought that this unit would really allow us to meet our RA obligations. And so the graph here kind of shows the peaking gas unit portion and the battery storage portion, which we've added in. And so for the peaking gas unit, this will be primarily run for grid reliability. So in September, in the summer, when it's really hot and the grid is stressed, the peaker would be able to quickly start up. So it can start generating electricity within 10 minutes of being idle. And then for the battery energy storage system portion, this battery system is going to displace the peaker energy. So it's really going to help with emissions reductions because it's going to charge during low emissions hours and shift the power to when the peaker gas plants would normally be dispatched. And so that's really the breakdown description of how the plant is going to be operating. Next slide, please. Okay, so we've talked about how the plant is going to be operating. Now I want to get into the plant's emissions. So due to tight RA supply conditions, the Hanford plant is likely to have run through the end of the decade, whether or not SVCE had contracted for the unit. And as I said earlier, SVCE's contract is 12 years in duration, and both the energy storage system and the natural gas peaker will begin deliveries for SVCE starting this fall. And the projected energy dispatch is expected to result in around 5,000 metric tons of CO2 being emitted per year at the start of the contract period. And to put this in perspective, I want to highlight that the CPUC's electric sector GHG emissions target for 2030 is 25 million metric tons of CO2. So Hanford's projected dispatch at the start of the contract is just 0.02% of that. And earlier when Monica was talking about how California will keep some gas on the system for reliability, this is what you're seeing here. So in 2030, the state still expects the electric sector to emit 25 million metric tons of CO2. And then our hybridization of the plant, so the addition of the battery storage system, is expected to decrease the utilization rate of the gas portion of the plant, which will likely result in the yearly emissions decreasing over the lifetime of the contract. And on the right, I just wanted to visually show how much the power plant is running relative to how much it could run, which is the capacity factors. So contractually, the capacity factor for the plant is 22%. But in terms of the ratio of the actual energy that was produced compared to the total energy that could have been produced, you can see on the left side that the 2022 actual capacity factor was only around 2%. So the plant is not expected, it hasn't been running very much and it's not expected to. Next slide, please. Okay, so now I will get into the actual proposal for the guidelines now that we have talked about how we expect the hybrid plant to be operating. So when developing these guidelines, staff really had two objectives. And the first is that we wanted to fund existing programs that would help reduce emissions from greenhouse gases through electrification activities in disadvantaged or low-income communities in Kings County. And a second objective was to propose a funding amount that would be able to make a meaningful impact and would be worthwhile to spend resources on. So there's 6 key points in these guidelines. The first is that at a very, to start off with, it would just establish the fund. So it would establish the Hanford Hybrid Plant Emissions Mitigation Fund, otherwise known as the Hanford Fund for short. The beyond establishing the fund, the guidelines would require the fund to be used to fund existing local programs to help reduce emissions in Kings County. And again, these would be for programs benefiting disadvantaged or low-income communities. And then the guidelines recommend a one-time funding allocation of $750,000 to $1.8 million for the entire duration of the contract. So this would be a one-time funding allocation for the entire 12 years. And it represents a little over 0.5% of SVC's total programs budget allocation and 0.3% of the total not to exceed amount approved by the board for the Hanford PPA. So it's really just a drop in the bucket. And then the guidelines also would stipulate that the fund could be used to pay for activities led by organizations that are working in Kings County. And SVC staff would need to evaluate the effectiveness of the fund disbursements. And the last key element of the guidelines is that all funds in the Hanford Fund would need to be dispersed by the end of the contract period, which is June 1st of 2036. And then I just want to end on the impacts. So the guidelines would require us, as I mentioned earlier, to evaluate the effectiveness of the fund disbursements. So we would kind of check in and see that the fund disbursements are effective and actually helping to do what the fund aims to do. Next slide, please.
Sid, Lolly, I just had a
Yeah, you want a
question.
question now?
Sorry to interrupt right now. That's quite a wide range. How do we know if it's 750,000 or 1.8 million? What will drive that range? Sorry.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm going to talk about it in the next slide, but there we
I can
will
wait.
well, it will be based on us getting feedback from the community in terms of based on what their needs are and what we think we could do. We would then decide what the range, where in the range we would land.
Thank you.
So as I was saying, an option or requirement could be included in the guidelines for stakeholder input. And the idea is that we would have, as I was saying, an engagement process to receive feedback directly from Kings County community members, because we don't have any experience with that community, and our level, we probably wouldn't be as effective as the folks who are working in the community and are part of the community. And so we want to understand the types of emissions reductions programs that would be most beneficial to Kings County residents and what the community's priorities are. And then based on that, we would determine where in the range it would make most sense to be. And then, yeah, the guidelines could require the collected feedback to be used to determine the best course of action for using the funds. Next slide, please.
All right, just a moment.
Since we have a moment, I'll just make a comment that I've been involved with nonprofit projects, kind of like this internationally through Rotary International, and the weakness of them is twofold. One is some group from America comes in and decides what Guatemalans need, and so I really like the tone of this. And then the second thing is how you monitor progress and that the funds are really going to where you want them to, that you've got a sustainability piece and closing the loop on the spending sort of piece. So those are the things that I've seen in these other projects that are good to have.
Can you?
Okay, I will just, yes, thank you for that. I just took a note of those 2 points. So for the conclusion here, the guidelines will enable us to meet the board directive to develop the policy or guidelines to set aside these funds to be used to help mitigate the emissions associated with the energy produced by the Hanford hybrid plant. And then, of course, after the executive committee provides feedback on the proposed guidelines, we would return with a modified proposal for the guidelines if there is any substantial feedback. And I will take questions now or commentary.
Thank you. Questions? First up, Vice Chair.
Thank you. This is a very innovative program, so I've got a few questions for you. First of all, just in the context, maybe I missed it. We're using this for RA. And how often, and we use the plant 2% of its capacity. Is that correct?
We haven't used the plant yet, but it was previously being used in 2022, 2% of the capacity.
So it was running very infrequently, is that correct?
That's right.
Now, we're using we've got the plant in our RA. How much of its capacity, if we needed all of that RA, would we be using? How much would it
Well,
be?
we've got Chris on the line. I think Chris can probably answer the question best, what we think what we expected to dispatch.
So are you talking about RA or energy?
I'm talking about how often the plant is running. I'm trying to figure out, what's our obligation and, how much good are we doing and what are the other users of the plant, what are they contributing? That's kind of where I'm going with my questions.
Yeah, so the difference, right, is with the Hanford project, we added the battery. And so this will reduce how much gets used because we'll be able to control what products are bid into the market at what price on the battery side. So that'll cannibalize the usage of the facility and overall reduce the emissions over time.
So
I think I understand. So the project, the Hanford peaker plant is a 93 megawatt plant, right, Chris?
Yes.
We have right now, we procured 2 things off of it when we signed that contract that the board already approved. So and it starts in October. We procured the resource adequacy, so we get all the counting rights for reliability, plus we have a gas toll on it. So when the project has to run, and it will run for reliability purposes, then the energy that is dispatched and then scheduled into the market will become our energy. And that's when we get emissions associated. That could happen, like Lolly said, it can run for a certain number of hours every year because of its efficiency. It can't run all the time. It's considered a plant only, not a baseload plant. But if we base it on historical, then we'll be running at maybe 2% of its capacity, or no, 2% of the time, which is something of its 20% capacity. We don't know. It's all going to be based on economics too.
And
We don't know what it's going to be.
Understood. So one of the positive things I see of this is I heard that there was some resistance in Nevada to the, I think it was Yellow Pine 3, where they were saying, this power is leaving our community and going to California. So they didn't like that. I think that having some responsibility for what's going on, where we're getting the power from is very much a positive thing. So I'm very supportive of it. And I think the amount is okay, the 750 to 1.5, and I understand the huge, the double in the estimate, but that's also over the 12-year life of the agreement, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a one-time funding up to 1.8 million.
And so one of my next questions is, how many other CCAs are doing this type of thing? And are we at the leading edge of the curve because we're more mature, if you will? Or is it, or, do other CCAs do that? And in your research, did you consider that?
I do think that we are at the leading edge, of taking responsibility for our portfolio management. And then in terms of how many are doing this type of program, I think we would be the first.
Wow. I think that's showing leadership. And I think there will be a lot of eyes on this, on what our guidelines are, because other CCAs will leverage off that, all the work that you put into.
I do want to say that one critical part of this is we have not worked with the community yet. And so we didn't want to go to the community until we had a sense of what the budget or a fund could be, because we didn't want to promise anything. And so a critical thing is going to be how this is received. So we will start to reach out to the community once the board approves the fund, and then we'll get some feedback on how it's received as well.
Are you done?
I'm done, yes.
So-
Thank you very much.
Before I go to the other questions, that was going to be one of my questions. Kings County, at least in going through news, has been, let's say, anti-energy, anti-solar to some degree from a residential standpoint, or at least a leadership standpoint. How much it goes to the residents from that standpoint is a bigger question. So finding community leaders within the community that will actually back this, because it's not like we can run this program remotely. Are there organizations already? And I know we haven't done a lot of outreach, but are other organizations ready to basically carry the baton locally to make sure that this is actually a success?
Yes, we did look into potential organizations. I can send you the list of them, but we do have 4 or 5 on the short list that could actually do the work.
Okay, and I appreciate that, because that was the biggest thing is, are we trying to basically, bend the needles or redirect the public opinion locally so much that, money is nice, but if at the end of 12 years it isn't really there, it doesn't really help us. Several questions. I'll continue, might as well, since I started. You talked about Hanford likely continuing to run for the rest of the decade. We have a 12-year, and I can't remember this from our discussions before. Does it mean conceivably before the end of the 12 years, this would be shut down or could be shut down?
No, not likely.
Okay.
So there's 2 basic types of power plants, gas power plants on the grid. There's the baseload ones.
Yeah.
They have a really high efficiency level, capacity factor, and they run all the time, like the one that we just bought reliability off of, or are going to.
Yeah, understood.
Assuming the board approves it. And then there's the peaker ones, which are much less efficient, but can come in, like Lali said, on a 10-minute basis.
Right.
Those are the type of plants that'll probably stick around for a while,
Okay.
for decades. But the CPUC hasn't identified that yet. And so that's part of a process that they're going through right now. It's called I don't know, Marin's on the call, but anyways, it's a proceeding that they're going through. We're hoping that as part of that process, where they figure out how we're going to get to 2045, that they come up with a plan on how to phase out natural gas plants too.
Okay.
But likely these ones will stay online for a long time.
Okay, the bigger question was from the presentation, likely being a decade and not decades.
Decades.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just clarifying that because that was a big question on my mind. Let's see, so you mentioned activities. So, is this education, or is it basically hot water pumps? Is it solar panels on local? What would be the ultimate goal of this program? And I understand you have several different organizations that you conceivably are dealing with, but is it just an education, or are we actually talking about basically reducing carbon emissions locally in Kings County?
So the guidelines, excuse me, are written so that it could be all of the above. We didn't want to specify, we didn't want to get too granular in terms of the specificity of the exact program type, but it would generally need to advance electrification in the community.
Okay, that's positive. And then how would this be reported back to the board? And how often, once this program rolls out?
Actually, that's a great comment. We only planned for one report out, but we can add in a cadence of whatever the board would like.
I think that's useful, especially if we're seeing a positive impact, and not that we couldn't spend this money within our own district, our own direct residents, but I think as the vice chair said, being seen as a point of leadership strong leadership around the state is only better for the organization, but conceivably this is something that we could replicate depending upon how successful it is. So I appreciate that. That was all my questions. Member Tyson,
How'd you know I had
I
questions?
saw you have your hand go up.
I wasn't, yeah, so anyway, I'm glad, your question was exactly where I was going. And that is, because this is a fair amount of money coming into a small community, and I picture it being in a small community, about arm wrestling and all. So it's gonna be really tricky, I think, how you identify the counterparts and how they represent the community. So I'm just gonna, I already understand now, you're waiting to get the money approved and then go and find that you've got a list, so I'm happy with that answer. The other comment is, now that I think about it, I kind of like that range because it serves as a bit of a carrot for those organizations to try harder to get, the upper end of that money as part of that. So I'm liking that aspect as well.
Member Waller?
I agree with pretty much everything that's been said, and this is great for us to learn from, for us to be a leader in, and make the real change happen. I'm connecting it back to our mission to reduce emissions, and with our leadership in supporting programs in that area, we are spreading it. I'm excited to think that we are spreading it beyond our geographic territory, which is where we typically work. And there's a good reason why we are doing it. It's not like we are trying to just spend our money elsewhere. I love it.
Thank you. Vice Chair?
So when you think of our carbon footprint, right, it extends outside of our geographic boundaries. So I'm reinforcing that point. And just in terms of the numbers, I just crunched a few. So if you say it's 750K and let's just say for rounding purposes, there's 50,000 residents, right? That's like $15 to $30 per person over the 12 years. So then you divide 15 to 30 divided by 12 years. That's like, $1 to $2.50 a year per person, just to kind of put it into a little ballpark perspective. And I think that's certainly affordable and something that we should do.
And from a funding standpoint, do we need to make an actual floor or ceiling recommendation to this? Or should we be making a recommendation to the board of the 750 or the 1.5?
I think you can provide I don't know if you need to provide a minimum. Right. But I think the minimum does give us the indication that we should strive to spend something. I think the more important is the cap, the 1.8, that we don't fund more than that.
Any other questions? Public remotely? Okay. Is there a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Actually, do we need?
Or-
We don't
It was
need a
on
motion. That's right.
discussion.
No, it's on
So,
discussion. You're right. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess the
We can
feedback that we're
guidance.
looking for is whether or not you would like us to come back again with your comments and incorporate it into a revised set of guidelines, or if we can go directly to the board in May with this.
My opinion, I think we can go directly to the board.
Okay,
I support that, and also that gives the board an opportunity. I'm thinking of the agenda planning. When it's busy, so in May, we can get more feedback. We'll have the time.
perfect, thank you.
Thank you. And we'll move on to our next item, a program snapshot, Priority Zone DC Fast Charging 2.0 program update. That will be Nupur.
Yeah, great. So nice to be here. Just wanted to introduce the program snapshot for today. My name is Nupur Hiremath, the Manager of Community Urbanization Programs. Hannah, our Senior Program Specialist, is going to be talking about our Priority Zone DC Fast Charging Program. This is a part of our broader program portfolio, but focuses specifically on DC fast chargers. And what we're presenting to you today is a kind of a refresh of a prior version of the program that we started back in 2019. We'll turn it over to Hannah.
Great, thank you, Nupur. I'm really happy to be here to present this snapshot today. Our Priority Zone DC Fast Charging Program, or PZDCFC, as we love to refer to it as. If you don't have enough acronyms in your life, you can adopt this one. Yeah, PZDCFC rolls off the tongue. But as Nupur mentioned, this is just one of our programs that really aims at addressing our multifamily EV charging access conundrum. And this is through incentivizing fast charging in high priority multifamily zones across our service territory. So next slide. So as Nupur alluded to, this is the second version of Priority Zone DCFC 1.0. Some of you may remember, this is our first version that was around between 2019 and 2021. And the fundamentals are very similar to this 1.0 program. So they were trying to provide incentives for fast charging in dense areas of multifamily communities. And we selected these priority zones through a lot of different data. So we were looking at, where are our multifamily units located? What is the density of those communities, the older ages of multifamily buildings, which probably don't have EV charging presently, and proximity to lower income customer indicators, as well as, where is public charging access currently? Where are these charging deserts? That's what we're looking for to fill those gaps. Ultimately, we didn't make awards for this 1.0 program, a lot of it to do with the fact that it was really an adder incentive on top of Cali VIP, another program. And so no grants were ultimately awarded in 1.0. Slide, Andrea. So that brings us to 2.0. We took all those lessons learned from 1.0. We relaunched this program in the summer of 2022. And so the program had really the same objectives. We want to incentivize DC fast charging in multifamily charging deserts. We want to help support EV infrastructure in our low income and high priority communities. And ultimately, we want to learn from this. We want to assess, how effective is this type of solution for supporting our multifamily customers or folks who don't have home charging currently. So this is a map you can see here. These little green circles are what we determined are the priority zones. They're about a mile wide. This links to an interactive map if you wanted to really dig into some of them. But we made a couple of updates, which included removing that Cali VIP requirement that I mentioned, and ultimately, making it a standalone program and increasing the incentive to match similar funding levels for fast charging. And yeah, so next slide, Andrea.
Is that a dot in the middle of San Jose?
It looks like it.
Unincorporated.
It's unincorporated.
Oh, okay, all right.
It is in our service territory. We got some funky little pockets here and there. Yeah, so a quick snapshot of the timeline here. So as I mentioned, we opened an application window for these sites between July and November of 2022. We were able to review and award selected sites, and we executed those 4 site agreements between January and March of last year. And since then, they've been under construction. So basically until earlier this year, we started to get some of these first completions, which is very exciting. So we're finally at this exciting point where we have some actual live installs. Actually, most of them are up and running now. And so we're beginning to plan out some more of the resident outreach and education materials, as well as some of the evaluation planning that we're intending to do for these sites. So next slide. So here are our 4 awarded sites that will ultimately have 10 ports total. So we have 4 ports in a retail shopping center in Mountain View, 2 ports at a gas station in Mountain View, 2 ports at a gas station in Milpitas, and 2 ports that are coming very soon to a public parking lot in Morgan Hill. And so you can see there, each of these sites are, within between 500 to 1,300 multifamily units within those priority zones around it. So we're really excited about that. Let's see, next slide, Andrea.
Nice geographic spread.
Yeah, we're very pleased about that. We did get a wide variety of sites, so we're happy about that. But we're learning a lot through this program, just a couple of these early lessons learned. Of course, decoupling it from another program really simplified the process. The applicants were all EV charging vendors. And we realized, granting awards and prioritizing sites that are really shovel ready, that have gone through the site, really speeds things up. So that's helpful. And so as I mentioned, this is a process we intend to evaluate and learn from. So we want to be conducting, multifamily outreach and education nearby these sites. We want to assess and get feedback from residents, how well does fast charging meet their needs? And also, over time, assess EV adoption rates among our multifamily customers in the priority zones over time. So that's all I have for the snapshot, but happy to take questions.
Thank you. First up is Member Wallace.
Thank you for your presentation. This is very helpful. Just curious, not a detailed answer needed, but just curious, why decouple?
Yeah, so for 1.0, we did have it required that basically we'll add an adder incentive on top of your Cali VIP award. I think the challenge was the rollout with Cali VIP 1.0, where it was fully subscribed within 5 minutes of rolling out, and the sites that they weren't necessarily able to make that connection between our priority zones and what awards will ultimately granted the Cali VIP as well. So it was just sort of the time frame and overcomplication of trying to link it.
Okay, I'm glad that you could see that challenge and decided to decouple. And what I really like in the 4 sites, 3 are live, as I can see, it's basically serving minimum 500 multi-family. So we know we are making, even with a couple of, and making a big difference. And the geographics, as was said earlier.
Member Tyson.
On your last slide, I noticed, and it's a little bit of a technical question, it mentions the battery aspect to the charger. So is that to allow it greater surge?
Yeah, they're actually really interesting. So these are a new charging company called FreeWire Technology. It's called the Boost 200. So they're actually 200 kilowatts. So if it's serving one EV at once, it can charge up to 200 kilowatt power. It's dual charging up to 100 each. And it has a battery integrated within it. And that's to reduce, basically it's so that the installation is a lot simpler because it's actually charging from the grid at a much smaller level, right, than your traditional DC fast charging would need. So theoretically, and I think we've seen this, the timelines can be sped up for installation and your electrical grid constraints are less of an issue.
I like it, thank you.
Questions? Questions?
DC fast charging is the landscape is very dynamic now, as you probably know. I follow this closely, and one of the big things is Tesla's opening up they've become the standard NACS. And just, you can always change what the physical connection is, but when I think of the communities that we want to locate in, I'm not sure that they're going to be on the latest and greatest. So anyways, it's just kind of an observation / comment. The one thing that I do think you need to coordinate and integrate with is the VTA. And I'm a member of the Policy Advisory Committee. And what VTA is doing is they're prioritizing um, their programs for basically giving discounting transit rates in certain communities that are adjacent transit lines. And the whole focus is trying to increase the multifamily that's in a transportation corridor. And I wouldn't want to, I think you should coordinate with them and understand what they're doing so that there's an integrated plan, so we don't have the VTA doing one thing, promoting something, and us promoting something else and not understanding the difference. I'll kind of leave it at that.
But it's a slightly different thing, and it's the home ownership of EVs versus the transportation being provided by VTA, I'm assuming. It's
Right, if
correct.
someone, Larry, if someone has to travel from Gilroy, for example, they do some local transit, and then maybe they come into the San Jose area. My constituents get upset with the VTA doing one thing that's out of sync with what's going on, quote, in the world. And I don't think we should contribute to that unless we do it knowingly. And all I'm raising is please see what they're doing and integrate the plans.
I didn't have any questions. I think, definitely looking forward to seeing how we continue to roll this out and looking for locations. From an application standpoint, how did we notify? How many applications do we have for these 4 sites?
Yeah, great question. I believe we had about 7 or 8 different applications that we reviewed. We actually intended to award 5 different sites. And one of the sites ended up having some site host permissions issues and had to drop out. So we ultimately had we technically selected 5 and executed agreements with these 4.
Good. And then as far as noticing and getting the information out, because it depends on whether or not you're targeting existing, let's say gas stations or shopping centers or all that. How are we figuring out, let's say, where the biggest need is from looking at the number of, let's say, multifamily units and age and all that? Are we doing any kind of holistic studies from our standpoint? Or are we just trying to say, we know that there's certain disadvantaged communities here, there's some general apartments, and we know that this would be a good place, and trying to do outreach, just trying to get a better feel for how to best make the program successful?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's something we're thinking about in the next iteration. We want to refresh these priority zones and update it with the latest data, especially since the charging landscape changes every year. So
Absolutely.
we're looking for those deserts still. So in terms of the data that we use, it's geospatial data largely. It's like our multifamily parcel data. We're looking at sociodemographic data. We're looking at our customer data, where our Carafera customers living. We're also looking at, existing public charging access. In terms of the next steps, we do intend to, rethink what other characteristics we might want to include for next version of priority zones. And in terms of getting the word out, it's a pretty targeted audience. It's DC fast charging developers when we launch these programs. So there's a pretty good email list that seems to work. It's, a lot of the statewide programs, PG&E or Cali VIP, the CEC, there's a pretty robust email list that we blast out a couple of times. And so they seem to be pretty receptive, and there's teams of folks on their teams that are looking for opportunities like this. But I think one other thing we'd hope to improve in the future is also getting some more community feedback. Where do people in the community want more charging, so.
Okay. Member Waller.
I am glad you mentioned that, because that's where my mind was going.
Yeah.
For other programs, few of us have offered that we can connect you with for community development departments. I'll repeat, my city, less staff, other priorities, they want this, but they don't have the time. The residents really want, this may not be exactly the particular thing, the multifamily, because we are not there yet with that high level of density, but it's going to happen. The key part is your team for different programs will be working, and I'm happy, again, my offer is there. Let me know, I can connect you to our community development department so that they can roll it out within their, whether we are talking single family for other programs or multifamily, comparatively lower density or something like this. That way you have a point of contact to get community interest come in and spread the word within each city.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that point. And yeah, it's something that we've been discussing internally as well. And it's something that we'll definitely work to improve in this next, in a 3.0 version. So
Absolutely.
I'll just add that we did speak with our member agency sustainability staff and had a little subgroup of 4 or 5 cities that have specifically been toying with this idea of, can we identify the places where lower income multifamily residents wouldn't have, and can SVCE kind of help in that? So we are collaborating with them to how we can maybe zones for the next iteration.
And I appreciate that. And from a board, or at least an executive board standpoint, I would love to see maybe a hot map, of out where the Carefera, how that's spread across the region, just to get a better feel for how that feeds into programs like this and other programs that we're looking for. Just to see also, whether or not, what the needs are and how we're utilizing. Okay. Any public comment? Anyone remote?
No answers.
Well, thank you for that update. It's fantastic to see programs like this, and this is always the fun thing of, okay, where are we spending our money, and looking at the differences we're making in people's lives.
It's true.
Yep. Last, our committee and staff remarks. Anything else? Sure. Member Waller.
Just wanted to back on what earlier about the Cal CCA conference last week. It was good. Presence from Team SVCE, a lot of staff folks were there. Larry was there, Brian was there, I was there, and a few others from board coming for a few sessions I'm permitting. Great sessions, and shout out to Monica for her presentation. She's on the block there, and we had Don Gray as a moderator for one of the sessions.
Good. And Lauren was a facilitator on the breakout session too, for the regulatory committee. She did a fabulous job there.
Okay, that's good. And so just wanted to share that at the next board meeting, we will, I'll start off with, we'll bring the award. It was great. We missed you that day.
I do.
We know.
We saw you were on the big screen though here.
Oh, that's true.
Yes.
He was featured.
Yes, for the award we got.
Oh.
And so I'll kind of include that when we start the board.
And I forgot to mention that the CEO report about the award, but we will bring it to the board. Included in the CEO report.
Fantastic. Yep. Okay. Anyone else comments?
I will echo those comments, and I'll say that Tina and I met with Craig, and I think we were the last 3 people to leave the conference.
Wow.
I left before you two.
Craig?
He was one of the judges. He's
Oh,
from
Craig Lewis.
Coalition.
Craig
Yeah.
Lewis, yes.
And I just want to say, so sorry I missed the second day, and things happen. But it was great first time to go to that conference, so it was very educational from that standpoint. And then, of course, last weekend was Earth Day, and so thank you for SVCE staff for being there. And just, it was a great opening, the grand opening of the 6 acres of open space around city at our civic center next to City Hall, and just a fantastic day of celebrating Earth Day. So that our event from a Sunnyvale standpoint keeps getting better every year, but it was good to partner with multiple community partners and highlight the good that you can do in your community for Earth Day. So thank you for everyone who attended.
Can I add
Sure.
one more thing? SVCE staff, thanks for the Earth Day. I attended the Cupertino one and I know staff was in so many situations.
Yeah.
So thanks.
I'll commend Sunnyvale for putting that on. I was there, I think, just before 3 o'clock when it ended.
Oh.
And I was looking for you, but people said you were
I
gone.
know I had.
And I did see Monica there,
I tabled with Juliet.
powering the ice cream truck.
It was a lot, it was really. a
Oh,
lot
it
of
was, I'm just so impressed with the Sunnyvale campus.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I think in that, and especially for like an Earth Day event,
Oh.
it's a perfect thing in closing down the street and having all of our partners there and then having the wildflowers and everything else. It was just.
The wildflowers, there was a bee
Oh, yeah. And then
booth there and
in our community garden right there doing,
Oh.
tomatoes and and tomatoes and peppers for sale. It's like, yeah, it was just perfect sort of event that I'm hoping that we continue for years to come. So thank you.
it was
Thanks for
a nice day
attending.
for it too.
Okay, and with that, we will adjourn at 11:28
Okay.
a.m.